which... Good evening, everyone. Okay, so welcome back to our today's session. So today is 12th of December, and this is the last chapter in our theoreticals, that's methods of reading and writing. As the name itself suggests, the entire chapter is going to involve different kinds of skills, which is developmentally appropriate for the children. So what are we going to do in the first few pages, like 10 pages or 8 to 10 pages, there's a lot of introductory methodology. Okay, why it is required, what is the science behind it, why preschoolers have to be involved, what kind of teaching methodology are we going to adapt, and other things, right? So this is going to be a building block for the teachers to understand the purpose of doing it. If you see in the further pages, like, once we start with the methods, after we introduce the motor memory and how do you touch the objects and the intellectual elements of reading and writing, that is where the actual chapter begins with, which talks about the real part. Okay, that's the methodology of what you are going to introduce reading for your children. And what are the techniques and methods which are appropriate for preschoolers when you are introducing writing. It is as simple as that. Now, say, for example, when would you introduce reading to children? Right from the younger ages. You can show them picture books, you can turn around the pages, and the child is introduced to reading. Is it developmentally appropriate? Definitely yes. The child is looking at the pictures, the child is listening to you, the child is getting the love for literacy, and the vocabulary of the child is also improvising. This is a part of reading. Now, when I move to writing, in case of the parent or the teacher is giving them an activity where the child is holding and tracing and trying to write anything, which is where I'm trying to work on the fine motor development. So this is what we're going to be looking at. Now go to your page number 289. Now, what is the page? 289. Okay. So this is where we are working towards the memory. Okay. So what is motor memory? When I'm writing something, say, for example, if I ask you to write the letter B, you should always know how to write a letter B. Agree? So that means whenever I'm working with my writing also, my brain should have the ability to store information of how my hand should move. If I'm writing a cursive B, how my hand has to move. So this involves a lot of coordination between my motor skill, that is my hand skill, along with my vision. I should also see how to write, correct? So that's my visual perception or the virtual perception. So what happens here is, like, when both of them are in sync, I would effortlessly write. Now, the more and more I practice, that's the reason we give children also, right, to practice multiple number of times. When the child is practicing more number of times, the children would develop with ease. So this is how they start developing the motor memory in classes. So when I'm working on the motor memory, these are some things which is not there in your book. So what am I working? Why should I require motor memory? Is something which is very important for you to understand. Now you can go back to your books also. So in the books, it has been given in a little difficult format for you to understand. That is a motor memory. It clearly says, like, you have to choose any letter. When you're choosing a letter, you're going to teach them the directions of it. So what is the skill that you're pulling out from that? Don't you think it's a fine motor skill? Any letter you take, you're teaching the children how to trace that letter. So that means my small muscles are used. I'm also using my fingers, holding the pencil, moving my hand in fine movement. So my letter is formed. If the children are unable to do this, I have to give activities. Please note down, I have to give activities which can involve pinching, which can involve threading, which can involve tweezers, wherein a lot of pressure would be applied on my fingers. When there's a lot of pressure which is applied on my fingers, my finger muscles will be strengthened. My muscles will become stronger. So that would help. So this is called the muscle memory. This is called the muscle memory or the fine motor development. It is required for writing. The second thing, you should have hand-eye coordination. This is what we saw in the last class. Hand-eye coordination should be there. My muscles should be having good memory. I should be able to remember. When the teacher says, children, write the letter B, if she says, write a straight line, half around, you should be able to remember the movements, isn't it? So there is a pattern that gets involved. for every letter, for every shape. Now, this becomes automatic over the period. So you don't have to put in a lot of effort. Tomorrow, when I say, Amina, write your name, immediately she writes Amena. She doesn't even think, is she putting effort? How do I write A? But when I tell this to a 3-year or a 4-year, they might put lot of effort because writing is still not automatic for them. When you want the children to have good writing, automatically, consciously, they should be able to write, which requires less effort. Practice. Repetition is important. When I have to have good repetition, what should be good enough? Muscle memory. Hand memory should be good. Only then the child will be able to understand and write. The next important in motor memory, which is not mentioned in your book, is about the spatial relationship or the spatial awareness. The child should know how much of a space they have to give between letters, how much of space that they have to give between words, and how much of space that they have to live between the lines. These are the three important things. Most of the M3 or the UKG teachers, they forget to introduce this. Because of this, when they go to grade 1, children do struggle. They might not be aware of it. So that's the reason you have to stress. Give a finger gap. So when the teacher is writing on the board, you can give a palm distance. Okay, you can give one palm and then write another word. So always tell children how much of space you need to live. It could be in anything, even in the drawing classes, you can talk. So whenever you're teaching children how to draw lines, to what extent you have to draw, how long or how short or how big you're writing or tracing, this is all towards the spatial awareness. So again, spatial awareness is related to your muscular memory or the motor memory. Only then the child will be able to work on that. To support all this, guys, in motor memory, the child should be introduced to good grip and pencil control. This is vital for all of us. If they're unable to have it, give strengthening exercises. See, initially they will have this kind of a central grip. They hold the pencil like this and they would do it. And slowly they might hold like this. And eventually the child will get the tripod grip. Now, this has to be our go-to goal for every teacher. What could be the grip that my child is going to bring on? So this is going to happen. Now say, suppose in case, what did Dr. Montessori believe? Now I'm going back to your textbook. Okay. Now if you go back to your textbook, that is where they have mentioned, I don't know in which page it is mentioned, they have said that Dr. Montessori was thinking about an observation. Okay. So she was thinking, okay, let me bring back the methodology, what we were practicing in the ancient Rome, because she was there in Italy, right? So she was like, okay, let me observe how it was. Now, what happened there in Rome, it was quite normal for every girl child to weave the throwable mats. What is throwable mat? It is a mat. They were weaving the mats and they were exporting, they were selling. So what did Dr. Montessori saw that was like, it was very essential for every child to do that. So what she thought is, when a normal child was able to do this, she started thinking, okay, they have so much of strength there. That means their hands have got so much of power. She said this power is nothing but the motor ability or the motor memory. So when the child was able to do throwable mats, why can't the child do other skills? It could be darning, it could be any skills which is involving like needling, right? Reversing the thread. She started experimenting. That's how the EPL skills all came into existence. Not only why the children will have to weave the mats, why can't they also work on the other skills which requires a lot of fine motor? So from there is what Dr. Montessori learned. When children try to adjust their muscles, when the children try to make good amount of fine adjustments into their muscles, their nervous systems will also support. If you are not attempting, that means your brain will also not give you impulses, right? It will not tell you how to do it. So what you need to do is, like, any time that you need those small movements, no, especially when you're trying to put a thread into the needle, you have to put a very tiny impulse, a very small movement. So that means there has to be a very fine impulse to your nerve systems to move to this fine movement. So all those things were very required for the muscle movements. So Dr. Montessori said then, if children will have to work on fine motor skills, we have to teach them to be more gentle. You have to teach them to touch objects in a gentle manner. This is what your book talks about. They say that before you let the children to touch objects abruptly, to rush all of that, she said, okay, teach them to gently touch. When you're taking a lot of time to touch that object, the children will start to discover many other things eventually. Like, what is the color of it? What is the shape of it? How does it feel when I'm actually touching that particular object? There is a lot of advantages on that. So that means the child started to gain a lot of muscular control. Very important. Wherever it is mentioned in your book, please underline that. You have to teach children to touch gently. A gentle touch has to be introduced. This is how you are going to introduce how do you touch objects. Now, why should I introduce a gentle touch? Only then my child will have muscular control. They will have a control on how they are touching, what they are touching, isn't it? So that becomes really easy for all of us. Now, what happens if your hands are too clumsy? Can you still get that kind of a touch? The child will not even know. Now, say, suppose in case if the teacher is asking the child, can you pick up a pink color square? Now, just imagine the child's hands are clumsy and the child is putting the hands everywhere on it. He himself will not be able to figure out where is that pink color square. He will forget about the skill or the movement that it was required for him to pick only that. So this is what Dr. Montessori also says, like, clumsy hands and fingers, which cannot moderate their force, are very bad servants to anyone. They have sins of commission. They cannot help breaking things, and of omission. They cannot make the fine movements which require skill. Correct? For any skill, you should definitely require a movement. That movement is a fine movement. This is what Dr. Montessori says. But why do we need to have that gentle touch? Why should we have that fine motor or the muscular control? Is because it has its own pedagogical advantage. What is the advantage? There are two advantages. First of all, when you touch an object, you get a sensation. Agree, everybody? We feel what is that object is all about. There is a sensation. Now, again, we are going to now differentiate those sensations. One is, as soon as I touch this particular pen, I get that sense of touch. Okay, so I know, okay, this is hard or this is soft. So what happened here, when my fingers touched this particular object, I knew what kind of a touch it was. I could feel it. The second thing, when I'm touching it consciously, I'm also able to observe how my fingers are moving. These are the two distinct sensations. When I'm moving my fingers from one end to another one, I can see that there is a bump here because of the cap, right? So the sensations are different. But when I'm holding it over here, maybe I don't feel so much. So these are the two differences. When you're touching it, what is that sense of touch you got? When you're moving your fingers across the body, across this particular object, what is the sensation that you get? So these are the two distinct sensations, very important, please underline. So what is the pedagogical advantage of touching objects? As teachers, as students, the students will be able to derive two distinct sensations. One is how your fingers are touching. Second thing is like, what is the sensation that you're feeling as your fingers are moving across that object? So the challenge for teachers is, it's very difficult. You can't let the children to always touch any object gently, correct? So these are the very difficult ones that we always face. That's the reason Dr. Montessori introduced sensorial materials. So when you go to your when you work on your practical materials, you will find list of sensorial objects. Now, if you see every object, we always say sensitize your fingers, gently touch the object, feel it, grade it, right? So this is what we say. That's why you started working with multiple materials. It could be sandpaper letter, it could be oven material, it could be even the fabrics that we gave, touch tablets we gave, the temperature bottles that we actually had. The children could actually touch them and feel the sensations all across. Now, what is that you're going to be teaching over here? So can I use blindfold? Definitely yes. Because when you are using blindfold, the children will be able to feel a little better because they are not visually seeing. They're able to gently touch, and they're able to get the sensation of, and they're able to see and feel how it feels like, how does it feel like. The child will be able to work on it. So when there is touch, when there is motor memory, which becomes an integral part of it, that is when we start introducing writing. Okay. So before that, we don't introduce writing. So now is where the Dr. Montessori also says, like, now it is good time for you to introduce the intellectual part of writing. Or what is the intellectual element in writing? Can somebody tell me about it? Which page it is? Because I don't have this in my book. Okay. So I don't have this particular part in our
292.
290. Okay.
92.
Okay. Okay. So I don't have this. What does it say? Can somebody click a photograph and send it to me? What does it talk about? The intellectual element in writing? Does it talk about the letters? I'm just going to show you. Is it what it is going to be the same thing? Just check. If this is what is there. Does it talk about vowels and consonants? How do they change colors? Is there anything like that in the book? Because this is what
Ma'am, it's more of the letters actually.
Okay.
Yeah, vowels and consonants also they are talking about.
Yeah, it talks about the contrast between the
Yeah.
letters. How
Yellow sandpaper mounted on dark cards, and consonant black emery paper mounted on light cards.
Lovely, lovely. Okay. Okay. So before we get very much deeper into it, you got to understand first something. See, the book sometimes gives you good information. Sometimes they miss out in defining what is that topic all about. So if you see the first introductory parts in this, it could be motor memory, it could be the intellectual writing. They don't have the definition of why do we need it? What is the purpose of it? They have straight started with how to do that particular thing. So first, let's understand what's the intellectual element in writing. See, first what I have to do, I have to write. What do I write? Whatever ideas I have in my mind, my thoughts, my emotions, I have to be writing. Now, when I'm writing, I can use my pen or pencil to write. When I'm writing with that, it involves my letters and words and sentences and paragraph. Now, what if I have not learnt that? I can still draw, paint, I can still connect with the outside world through painting. There are different ways of writing and expressing your thoughts. But here, in this particular portion, we are going to restrict ourselves to writing in a language. So that means you choose whatever language is the medium of communication for you in your classes. Now, most of us, we would be communicating through English language. So English language, I would be able to teach children the letters. If the child knows about letters and words and sentences and paragraphs, he should be able to express his ideas, thoughts, and emotions and is able to write. This is what is going to be there. Now, what I have to be working is when I'm introducing writing, there are only two things. One is the child's motor skill should be good. Second thing is like he should be able to comprehend what he wants to write. Now, if I'm saying the same story, Lakshmi and Purni, both of them, they comprehended, but how they're putting it onto their paper is their creativity. Agree? So somebody, she might also add drawing, she might also write with good vocabulary and other things. It's totally according to their creativity, their imagination also. So this is the natural extension to your intellectual part of it. How do I increase my intellectual development through writing? That's the reason we always ask children, give any topic and ask them to write. So that gives them the power to think. That gives them the power to comprehend and write and express all their feelings onto the paper. If you don't have the habit of journaling, each one of you try to journal every day. Day by day, you become better and better in expressing how did your days goes. So what happened in the classes? Now, say suppose if my child is too young to understand such a big conceptual thing, I would start from simple ones. Now, if you see this material, this is called movable alphabets. What is the first thing that each one of you are able to differentiate here? You are able to differentiate the color. Is it contrasting? I don't have a light blue and a dark blue. Do you see the contrast between the vowels and consonants? Definitely, yes. It's visual first. So I would be able to give the lot of differences for the child. This is the first thing, a visual discrimination. That is what is required. Now, if I'm using method, I can use different methods to teach children also. Now, say suppose in case if I'm using sequence method, just like Montessori method, we have sequence method. Edward Seguin is his name. Sequence method, you don't work with A, B, C, D, E, F, G. We don't go with that way. But what we always do is we always start by introducing the vowels. Okay, you only talk about A, E, I, O, U because vowels are slightly difficult for the child to remember. Now, whenever you're doing O, you would also teach zero because a child should understand that O and zero, even though they might have slightest changes in the appearance, they're not the same, right? So you are going to give them the differences. So you will give this material. It could be sandpaper letter or your movable letter at that time. And you would ask the children to trace or touch that particular letter and get the feeling and the sensation of how a letter, that is my vowels, have been written. This is what is first taught. Okay, so they have been first taught by the color differences, and then is what I have a command of other letters being integrated, and I would give children to trace every letter. It could be through pencil or it could be through fingers, however it could be. Now, what happens if the child has mastered all my letters? Then is what I take a copy. Copy is nothing but a notebook. I would say a word, the child will have to write that letter. Sorry, if I have to say a letter, the child will have to write a letter. I say a word, the child will write a word. If I say a sentence, the child will write the sentence. Now, here, what am I supposed to concentrate is not on the spelling errors. Okay? I'm only wanting the child to get the strength on writing. They should be able to write. So in intellectual element in writing, we are not worried whether the child is understanding what he is writing. No, that is not my interest. I will only be concentrating on that letter. Has it acquired the rightful shape? Is the child writing in the right position? Is the child applying proper pressure? Is the child writing with good speed? Whatever the child is writing, am I able to read and understand? Is the handwriting of the child legible? This is what I'm supposed to understand on this. So this is what command over pencil would mean like. Okay, so what happens at this particular process when you're trying to work is there are a lot of errors that the child will do. Agree? The child would do a lot of errors, isn't it? So what I have to do here is like I don't have to reveal that error. Somewhere it would have been noticed in your book. 292, somebody was telling me, see, it would have been written that you should not relieve the errors to children. This is a major thing. If it is there, please underline. Don't tell you have written wrong and take a red pen and mark it. Please never do that. So what do we do over there is like we repeat of how to do that. Rather, we don't relieve what errors that the children are making on spot. This is absolutely essential for us to get the good results of how you want the child to actually write. Mistakes are already given. That's the reason you always give pencils to children, right? This is what Dr. Montessori also says. Okay, the experience of what the kindergarten students or the Montessori students will go through has to be really good. So you should not put them under the risk of confusion. Never put them into the risk of confusion. The child should never be confused to write a letter. Give instructions. If letter B and D are confusing, you always give them the direction. Write a straight line and then letter C and then as D. So you can always give them some kind of tips and suggestions so that the child is never getting confused all about. Correct? Now, do I use? Yes.
Excuse me. What type of instruction we are supposed to give when they are started writing, ma'am? Is it a format of standing line, sleeping line, curves kind of thing? Or it is C, inverted B. What is the proper words we need to use when we are
Especially we use it for the lower cases. Okay,
lowercase?
instructions, yeah. When they are writing, you can give them, like, it totally depends on the teacher. What kind of instructions is she giving?
Okay.
Say suppose in case what happens here is like mm, how do I begin? Any letter you have?
Like
Any
G,
letter you have?
G, G.
G, letter G.
G.
How do I give instructions for the letter G? Okay,
Okay.
so you can always say for children, like it starts this way, right? So I can say a curve, then how do I move? So it's a letter C, then I go up, then I get a stroke down. So you can go always that. But in
Okay.
case if you are working with the lines, especially, then you can always say, like, using the lines, like, start below the blue line, then
Yes.
circle back all the way around, then push up straight to the blue midline. Then again,
Okay.
you pull down through the straight red based line to the next blue guideline. See, when children are using 4 lines, we always help them to work on the lines, especially. Like similarly, like say, suppose in case if I'm taking the letter H, how does the
Mhm.
letter H starts? We have a top line, um,
Two lines
A, and
and
then these two, right? So you can always start, like, start at the top line. So your top line is
Top line.
your red. So you start at
Red line.
red headline, or what line you call? Skyline, or what do you
Third line
call?
blue line.
skyline
Skyline.
brown.
Then what do? You pull down the straight line. Where? To the
Till
Second blue line.
blue baseline.
Blue line, blue line.
To the blue baseline. There are 2 blue lines. Which one? Top line
Yes, yes.
or the bottom line? So that's the
But
reason there are no proper these things like what the schools would follow. Like in case if you're following in your school, you can say like a baseline, a blue baseline. Then you push up straight. Then you curve forward. Then you pull down straight to the blue
Blue.
straight line. So
Okay.
every time that you're writing, na, Purni, you can actually make up those instructions. Okay,
Sure.
so that's
So
something
we
which
can
is good
use
enough.
those words, no? So it's
Yeah.
like curves and all those
Yeah.
things.
Some of
Okay.
them, I have seen some of the teachers for the letter A, like, like Wali ma'am, I have always seen in our classes, like whenever she's teaching the lowercase a, she always says, like, A is apple, right? So she
Uh-huh.
always writes a tiny apple down and she says around the apple and down
Okay.
the leaf.
Okay.
It totally depends on teacher to teacher. For
Got
letter
it.
B also, she says, like, B is for what?
Belly.
Belly, B is for anything. Like C for caterpillar. So you can say curl around the caterpillar.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, for D, you can say around the dinosaur's bottom.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, for E, you can say, like, lift off the top and scoop off the egg. So each teacher will have a different way to say. It is all up to you. There is no such one instruction. That's the reason I told you, whatever makes it very easy for each one of you to work on it, you can actually write.
Sure.
ठीक है, all right, yeah. These are for your writing. So this is very important for us. So intellectual writing for us is not about the spellings. We got that right. So even in your book, if you go through, it is always about that. Now, what I'm trying to link here, if you go to your next page, that is 293, it talks about the 3-period lesson. Okay, so they have not mentioned, but it talks about what is the first stage, what is the second stage, and what is the third stage. Agree? So what is your first stage? You introduce the letter to the child and you said, this is the letter. This is how you have to write. The second period, show me what letter is that. Show me how do you write it. Is this the way I write? Is this the way I write? So you're also asking the child, is this the way we write to? So what becomes my third stage? My third stage, I would always ask the children,
And
what picture is this? Correct? So these are nothing but my 3 stages are nothing but the 3 periods of sequence. Now you know from where is that 3-period lesson coming up? Montessori also got inspired by this methodology by Edward Seguin. If you know Jean Ettard and Edward Seguin, these were the 2 Frenchmen who were influencing Dr. Montessori also, right? So because of the Seguin's method, she also was like, okay, 3-period works really good for us and it has to be applied. So not only in pictures, not only in writing, she also got them into nomenclatures. What is nomenclature? You go a little bit more deeper into the parts of it, right? So you actually can teach. So every time that you're using this 3-period sequence methods, what happens? Your teaching becomes very smooth. You're describing it in a better way. You're also asking children, when you're teaching the letter B, it's not only the letter B. You got to ask, is it a vowel or is it a consonant? Every time teachers forget this. You have to ask, yes, it's a consonant, ma'am. It's a consonant. What color is the consonant on that R material? It's pink or red? You can always ask. It's
Red.
pink, ma'am. Red, huh? Okay. Red. And what letter is A? A. What's the sound of it? Is it a vowel or a consonant? Every time that we actually ask this, what happens? Children are not only getting the concepts of vowels, they also know how to write, how to say, what is the sound of it and all. When you teach them how to write using the pencil, the air tracing and all of that, okay? So this gives them a good amount of command over pencil, okay? If you notice that the children are really not good with pencil, that is when you go to the other methods. You give them to work and other things. See, what's again important for you is like you can ask them to work on self-expression. Now this is another way, okay? Now say suppose as I was telling, like once there was a caterpillar, and you can ask the children caterpillar, okay? They can draw a caterpillar and they can write a letter C. So this becomes easy for a child. Not only you're teaching them the letter C, you're also teaching them the other ways to include the joy of writing. They're able to express the story, and at the same time, they're able to write letters. Now, as and when you're narrating story on the letter C, if my child is slightly old enough, who's now able to write words, because you have taught them how to put letters together to compose words. Then what happens? It becomes easy for me to list words, keywords, right? What is my hungry caterpillar story? Can somebody tell me if you know about it? Hungry caterpillar story. Do you all know? Can you recall if you have done it? In the light of the moon, there lays an egg. And then on one of the bright moonlight day, the egg hatches, and there comes a tiny caterpillar, correct? So what next? And the caterpillar starts to eat.
Eat the leaves.
Yeah. He's so hungry. Then what all he eats? He eats leaves at the end. Much before that, what does he eat?
The shell.
Middle
Uh-huh.
of
The
the
cocoon.
leaf.
No. The story, if you don't know about the story, the caterpillar starts to eat many things. Like the first time or the first day, he eats one apple. Then he's still hungry. Then he eats 2 pears. He's still hungry.
Oh, okay.
Then he will eat 3 plums. Then he's still hungry. So what he eats? He eats more and more other things like strawberries. He's still hungry. He eats 5 oranges. He's still hungry. Now what happens here? He starts to eat many other things. What could it be? Pickle, cakes, sandwiches, many things he starts to eat.
Ice cream.
Ice cream. Then what else he eats? What else he eats? Lollipop. There's a pie.
Eat junk food.
Yeah, there are many things, right? The cheesecake, the regular cake, the cupcake,
Candy.
pickle,
Then
everything
get
starts to
stomach
eat.
pains.
And then his stomach starts to hurt. And then he
Yes.
realizes, I shouldn't be eating all of that. Then he goes and he eats a leaf. Once he eats the leaf, he tries to build a cocoon around him. And then the tiny caterpillar will emerge into a beautiful butterfly. Yeah. So that's what is the moral of the story, that we can't eat junk. What we need to eat, we're supposed to have that. So when you're trying to work on that, what happens here? What is your inner feeling? When I say cake, he ate a piece of cake. Now everybody is drawing cake. So that's your inner feeling of cake. Somebody would have written something else. Somebody would have drawn something else. So that's how you would express. And then you write your word according to it. So this is also a part of intellectual element in writing. When you are working
Okay.
with little older children, like UKG children, you have to ask the children to draw as in when they say. This is very beautiful. Okay. So can I support this in my Montessori? Definitely yes. So what in Montessori we give them is we give them a script, and the children will have to read that. Whatever comes to their mind, however that they would have understood, the children will write one more time. Okay. So they will not write copy. It's not about copying. It's about what they understood is what they would be able to write. Now, if the teacher has taught them some method, now again, we're going back into your book. Now, in your book, what happens here is like there are some of the words which needs to be given importance. So the teacher will teach them how to read using the phonetic method. Correct? Every time my child is using this method, what happens persistently is looking at me. Correct? How my
Yes.
lips are moving. How am I saying the word? What is
Yes.
the meaning of that particular word? If I'm showing any object and saying, the child is persistently looking at me. So that means
Yeah.
listening is important, understanding is
Yes.
important, understanding the sound of every letter in that word composition is important. And at the same time, I have to understand the meaning of that word. When everything has been
Yes.
integrated, it becomes easy. Now there are children with different, what I could say, intelligence, I could say, or I could say some children understand it very quickly and they write everything. So they are very spontaneous. So in our class,
Okay.
not everybody are spontaneous. Agree, Amina? Right? Not everybody are spontaneous. Some children will take time. So what I have to do,
Yes.
I have to also go a little slower. But by the
Yeah.
time they are 5 years, they should be able to do spontaneous writing. When the teacher is saying, they should be able to spontaneously write. If they are not able to do that, my teachers will be working more on helping the child on phonetic awareness, vocabulary, comprehension, so that the child will start recognizing the letters, the letter sounds, the words, the word meanings. They understand, they interpret the language in a meaningful way. This is all is required when you're trying to work on reading. Okay. Your next topic in your book is all about the methods of teaching reading, how to read. The teaching of a reading is a skill for all of us to actually work, right? So what we do here is like we quickly disconnect, we come back again and see to work on this reading element, what are the things that we actually needed. Okay. So let's disconnect because we have just 30 seconds. We will connect back to this session shortly.